does not write the zoning ordinance, but does have the authority to grant relief from where practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship would result. The board will vote on each agenda item following a public hearing. Use variance requests require a minimum of 6 affirmative votes in order to grant the requested variances. Non-use variance requests require a minimum of 5 affirmative votes in order to grant the variance. Please note that any order of the board is valid for a period of 1 year. If you would like to request that the board table or adjourn your case due to the absence of full board, you must inform the chairperson immediately after the public hearing. Today we have a full board, so that won't be asked. Petitioners shall do their best to limit presentations to 10 minutes. Each participant in a public hearing shall do their best to limit comments to 3 minutes. All right, as stated, we have everyone here on the board. In fact, we have 2 new board members because unfortunately we lost 2 last year. So I'd like to have each of them take a chance to introduce themselves and welcome everyone. So we'll start with you, Corey.
All right, hello. My name is Corey Christensen. I'm relatively new to Royal Oak. I moved here in January of 24. I'm from Farmington Hills originally. Professionally, I work as a planner, so I have a lot of experience working with ZBAs. I handle the staff reports for the ZBA in Pontiac, so I'm just excited to bring my skill set to use here in Royal Oak.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Paul Bastian. I have been a resident of Royal Oak for over 40 years. I was educated here, grew up here, and I do also sit on the Historic District Commission as well, and I am a realtor based out of Keller Williams right here in downtown Royal Oak. I am also very excited to join this board and bring my skill set to the city.
Thank you both. All right. Moving on, we will go to the approval or modifications of the minutes for December 12th, 2024. Is there a motion and or modifications?
Motion to approve minutes.
Okay. And then second by Mr. Klatt. Any comment or discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. We will move on to unfinished business. From last time, it was case number 24-11-33 for 633 South Alexander Avenue. When you are ready, feel free to take it away.
This item was postponed a couple times since its initial hearing in November, so I'll briefly go through it again to refresh everyone. The subject site is located on the east side of South Alexander Avenue in the one-family residential zoning district. There is an existing single-family house on site. At one point, there was a detached rear garage in the backyard, but that was torn down years ago. And the petitioner initially proposed a new 18.1-foot garage in the rear of the property. And of course, that was initially proposed at the November meeting. And of course, the zoning ordinance limits the height of accessory buildings to no more than 15 feet, and we measure that at the midpoint at the highest roof line. So in this case, it was measured at the midpoint of this dormer. And since the November meeting, the petitioner has modified his plans, which does decrease the size of the variance requested. More specifically, the height of the garage is now 17.25 feet, which does decrease the size of the variance requested from initially 3.1 feet to now 2.25 feet. And this is reflected in the modified memo on the front page of your packets. So again, I would always encourage the board to consider the non-use variance criteria as you come to a decision on this matter. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for staff? All right, yes, Mr. Klatt.
So just to clarify, Alex, you said, so the overall garage, the ridge height came down, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then that in turn forced the dormer down?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, the petitioner is present. You may go ahead.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Littner, and so I want to thank you for your time tonight. My husband apologized because he's in the hospital having a surgery. So I think Alex already said everything that we needed to do, so I will take a vote, if that's possible.
Any questions for the petitioner?
So I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So we got some kind of letter saying that our garage could be no more than 18 feet, 1 inch. So we had altered a plan to be 18 feet. And I think my husband submitted it. I wasn't in the whole process, but this is what he had told me.
Anything else?
No, that should do it.
Okay. Any questions for the petitioner, Mr. Langweber?
Can you clarify what you're using the space for that's on the second floor of the garage?
For the storage purposes.
Storage.
Yes.
Is the dormer that's there, does that add additional storage space for anything in particular, or just
For
in
like a
general?
head space,
I
basically.
see. Okay.
Other questions?
I do. Just because I wasn't here when this was originally brought forward, but what is the hardship? If you could be more specific.
I think before we requested, the plan was 20 feet high, and then later, got turned down, and we got some letter in the mail that should go taller than 18 feet and 1 inch. So we altered the floor plan and everything, and now it's under 18. I mean 18 exactly.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, so the other question I have is about this is what I guess the question I have is what is you keep asking us, like, let me take a step back, sorry. If this were not approved, what would you just build it according to the maximum height, or is that or would that make you start from scratch?
I think I would go by with the letter that we got. It's 18 feet and 1 inch. And I think under 18 should be fine.
So what you're saying is you're asking us for the extra, but you would go back down to what that was?
18,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
That's the plan that we submitted before Christmas. That's the new plan.
Okay, so if I'm understanding what you're saying, then is that you are you would go bring it down to under 15 feet if this were denied tonight, or you would just resubmit it again?
Oh, we're gonna resubmit it again.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Moore, then Mr. Cloud.
Yeah, you're referencing a letter that you received saying that it would be okay if it was under 18 feet and 1 inch?
Yes.
Was that a letter from the city? I mean, do you have that
Yes.
letter
I do
with
not,
you?
but I think we have it at home. My husband keep it somewhere. But as I said, he in hospital, so I
Okay.
don't know where it is.
Are you aware of any letter that might have been sent saying?
I'm not familiar with that. It could be the initial permit review letter that was denied. That's what started the need for the variance application. But,
Okay,
yeah.
thanks.
Mr. Murphy, you don't have anything to add, correct?
Yes, I do. The elevation on the screen will illustrate that Alex had noted that we're measuring to the tallest midpoint. So there are several peaks and we're measuring on the structure, and we're measuring to, I'll zoom in a little better. But we're measuring to the midpoint of the dormer, and that's taller than the midpoint of the main roof line of the structure. So you can see that main roof line, the midpoint is 15 feet, but the higher point is of the dormer. So if the dormer were not present, this would comply with ordinance requirements.
My husband said that the dormer is coming off in the front of the garage.
Then that certainly impacts your variance.
Okay. I think Mr. Clatt was going to say something. Come to you.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Joseph. I was just pointing out the optics of that. When you look at that overall shape, it's definitely lower than that required, or the allowable height. But then too, that the garage, you submitted, in your application, you submitted an image of the original garage. Is that something you tore down when you did the driveway replacement?
Yeah.
Okay. By any chance, did you measure the height of, do you know the
No.
heights? Because that garage pitch looks very steep. It
Right,
actually looks taller than what
I
you're
think it's
proposing
as
here.
tall as the one that we're about to build. It's super tall.
Yeah, it
Because
definitely
I
looks taller.
remember going to the second floor, I can stand up like this.
Yeah, for sure. It looks like a much steeper pitch on that garage. So I just wanted to point that out, that what they're providing now optically looks smaller, except for the dormer, compared to what they had. And it's in obviously much better condition too, when you look at that.
Mr. Wolf, you were next.
And approximately how much square footage is that addition that causes the extra height? Do you know about how much extra space that is?
I do not know that.
Okay.
Mr. Christian?
Okay, I just want to say thank you for bringing up the pitch of the original roof that was there. One thing I just wanted to bring to the attention of people, one thing that I noticed when I drove by and looked at the house, it seemed to me that the pitch of that old garage matched what the house was, because the house has a very high pitch or steep pitch, and it kind of went together. So I just wanted to bring that out.
I just want to make sure I understand this. So this might be for staff, but if there weren't the dormer, that no variance would be necessary. Is that true?
Yes, that would be true,
Okay.
because we would measure at the lower midpoint then.
Got it.
Any other questions for the petitioner? All right. I just want to make clear, did you say that you guys would be removing the dormer if we didn't? Or is it, you mentioned something about removing the dormer.
So he said here that the dormer coming off in front of the garage.
Okay. That's it. Is that if we don't pass it, or you're going to just remove it from here for right now, or I'm trying to understand whether or not you're wanting to remove it before we even discuss, or waiting to see how we vote?
That's the plan. We're going to remove it.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Because I was going to say, if it's removed, then this would be a moot point, correct? That's why I'm just wanting to make sure. If he wants it, if you can have us discuss first and see what happens.
I know, but I wasn't involved in the whole process because.
Because I feel bad that your husband's not here because he's in the hospital, and I'd hate for you to accidentally do something, misinterpret anything of what he wanted you to do. So that's why I'm just trying to making sure what you want us to do. Do you want us to assume no dormer, or do you want us to assume go for it and then?
So you and me.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let me see. Reasons for decision. Okay, so. He's not asking it for to remove. He says the dormer coming off the front of the garage is there to provide more upstairs headroom. So it's not to mean to take the dormer off. It's meaning it's.
I think you mentioned that last time.
Yeah. Okay, that's why I want to make sure. Okay, so you want to keep the dormer on.
No
So,
head height
okay,
there.
there we go. Is there any other questions for the petitioner? All right. Seeing none, we'll bring it to this side, and after we have public comment, and then we'll vote on it. So you may
Thank you.
sit. Is there anyone to speak on this case for or against it for public comment? You may come forward now at this time. Going once? Going twice? All right. Public comment is closed. We'll bring it to this side of the board. Anyone for discussions and/or motions? Yes, Mr. Wolf.
So I'm really torn on this. I want to first thank the petitioner and her husband for letting me walk onto their property way back when, and for answering all of my questions. So I really do appreciate it. And what I'm about to say has nothing to do with you or your husband at all. But the question I have is, I just don't know what the practical difficulty is, and if it is. If it's self-created or not. And I guess the question, I was looking when I went on there for electrical or trees or, telephone poles, stuff like that. And I didn't see any that would make any kind of significant impact. So I'm kind of torn because I understand people, growing family that needs things, but I just don't know what the practical difficulty is.
Mr. Clapp.
For the sake of discussion, I'll make a motion to approve the variance.
Okay, Mr. Moore seconds. Go ahead, Mr. Clapp.
And again, I think I mentioned some of these last time. Well, number one, I appreciate you listening to our concerns from last month, and you made some attempts to reduce that. So the overall ridge height went down about 2 feet, which in turn reduced your variance request. again, from the public way, you barely notice this. I think you did a good job to lower it, and I think it'll have minimal impact from a public way standpoint.
Mr. Moore, anything to add?
No, nothing to add. Sorry. Nothing to add. I will just say that, looking at the character of the neighborhood, I actually live in the neighborhood, and there, are lots of dormers in the neighborhood. That's the style of homes that are around there. So I think that it will do substantial justice to the neighborhood over the garage that was previously there.
Ms. Robbins?
I'll be in support of this. I think it will, again, make the neighborhood look good as far as it fitting into the character. I understand that a lot of our houses right now are functionally obsolescent with the size and any storage, especially for the age of the house. I'd like to see some of the older homes kept up. So for that reason, I'll be in approval.
Mr. Wolf? Mr. Reddy, then Mr. Langweber.
I will be reluctantly opposed. Like Mr. Wolf said, I just don't see the practical difficulty unique to the lot. So,
Mr. Bastian, or Mr. Langweber.
I also am just not seeing the unique aspect. Oh, sorry. There we go. I'm not seeing the unique aspect of this particular case. It's storage space. The storage space would exist in one form or another, with or without the dormer. I just don't understand that this fulfills all the criteria for a variance.
Mr. Wolf?
Yeah, I too am going to oppose this for the same reason. Again, what also got to me was if the petitioner said that this were to be denied, that they would just resubmit in order to fit the plans, per the codes. So for me, this doesn't seem like a practical difficulty or an unnecessary hardship.
Any other comments? Darby?
I guess just procedural since I'm new here. So before we vote, do we always go down the line and say how we vote, or
No,
how?
just,
Okay.
it's a good indication just to show that you're been paying attention, basically.
And then if I'm going to vote in denial, should I cite exactly which standard? Some boards.
You can.
Okay.
You're welcome to.
I just feel that without any clear practical difficulty, I can't support the motion.
Okay.
I would also be reluctantly opposed. I do appreciate the petitioner's efforts to bring down the height, but I just feel as though storage being the reason behind this, I don't know that meets all the criteria.
I'm torn on this one, but I would be in favor of this, and here's the reasons why. If you look at the garage and didn't have the dormer on it at all, this would be no problem. This garage is being penalized for having the dormer on it. The practical difficulty is how our ordinances are written in such a way to penalize garages that are not necessarily super tall from having a dormer on it in this case. This would have been different if this was the 20 foot that it was before and the dormer was there at that time. Because this is actually the same size, if not lower than what they previously had, and because it's so well hidden in the back, I don't think it's going to provide it's not going to do any hardship to anyone outside the person who had interest in this. The unique circumstance is the fact that, hey, I've got a garage that might even be smaller in height-wise than the previous one, yet because I just wanted a dormer on there to get a little bit more extra room in my attic space, I can't get it because of the way the ordinance is. The variance would do substantial justice not only to the landowner, but also probably the others around it, because it's a nicer garage, therefore more likely increase the values of the property. And could they use it as a garage? Yes. Would they be able to use it as well? Versus having it as a 20-foot high ceiling and no dormer versus having a 18-foot high peak with a dormer. One could argue that one. So I can sort of understand that. But for those reasons, that's why I'm actually in favor of this variance. Yes, Mr. Moore, you had something more to add?
Yeah, I just want to say this wouldn't be the first time that we have approved a variance based on a need of storage. I mean, we've had other cases that have come before us where people didn't have a basement or, didn't have, a room for things for growing families, stuff like that. So it's not unheard of for this to come before our board and be approved. I don't know the circumstances of what their inside storage is like, and they haven't offered that, but, this isn't unique.
Mr. Wolf?
But I guess the question I would say in response to that is, was this self-created or not? And from what it looks like, based on what I've seen, and again talking to the applicant, it seems like because the garage that was there previously was demolished, for me that falls under self-created.
Mr. Klatt?
No, I was just going to point out what you mentioned, Anthony, the shape of the garage, right? By stepping that dormer in, it helps reduce the overall bulk of it. So again, just stepping back from the sidewalk from an optic standpoint, you just don't notice it.
Yeah, and like I said, I understand they demolished it and self-created it, but it was falling apart, they had to, so therefore, it's one of those things of, you're going to have to put something back there, and in this case, in my opinion, it's less height, so therefore it's lessening the situation, even though it's got a dormer, and the dormer is just what's knocking it. That is why it's bringing up an ordinance. So it's not their fault, in my opinion, that the ordinance is set up in the way that it penalizes anyone who wants to put a dormer on a garage that's a lower height than someone who I want a garage that's 25-foot peak. So that's my opinion. If this was a 25-foot peak with a dormer, yeah, I'd agree but in this case, they're trying to lower it as much as they possibly can, lower than what it was. And that's why I'm all right with going for this.
And storage is always a challenge in the older homes too.
And I agree, storage and money shouldn't be a factor in our things, and that's why it's not listed here. But that's why I'm trying to rationalize as to why if this had a dormer or didn't have a dormer, they need a new garage no matter what, and they're doing better than what was there for height-wise. So, in my opinion, I don't feel like they should be penalized for making it better than what it was. So, is there any other comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move to vote. Make sure you raise your hand. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, opposed? All right. Motion fails. Is there a motion in the opposite way to make it clean? Mr. Wolf?
I'll make a motion to deny the variance as presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. I don't know if there's any discussion needed, but if you want to, you can speak on it, Mr. Wolf.
Yeah, I really appreciate you, both of the architects on the board, explaining the architectural kind of insides of why how things work, and I definitely agree and I sympathize. But at the end of the day, what gets to me is that storage, it can be a practical difficulty depending on the circumstance. I'm not, like Mr. Moore said, I'm not going to get into that. But at the end of the day, we have denied other variances based on, people demolishing things at the house or on the property or whatever. So for that alone, I would say it's self-created.
Any other?
I guess I'll just add that the hardship that's been cited so far has been the ordinance itself, but my understanding is that there has to be something unique about the property in question, creating a hardship. So without anything, no matter how small, cited, I can't support this.
Fair enough. All those in favor of the motion to deny the variance as requested, please signify by saying aye. Raise your hand. Opposed? Nay?
No.
All right. Motion passes. The variance unfortunately has been denied. Sorry. We will move on to the next case, Mr. Clark.
Mr. Chair, I'll need to recuse myself from this case here as my company has direct involvement with the project.
All right. Since there will not be a full board, I'll be asking you at the end whether or not you want us to proceed or not, but I guess it's a moot point because he would have to recuse himself every time. So
We'll find a substitute.
So we will move on to case number 25-02-01 for 401 East 3rd Street. Whenever you are ready, you may take it away.
The subject site is a privately owned parking lot. It's located on the north side of East 3rd Street at the northwest corner of Knoll Street, directly adjacent to the courthouse. And the site itself is 0.37 acres in size. At the December 10th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting, they had voted to both grant site plan and special land use approval to allow the petitioner to construct a new multi-story building with 59 residential units. And as part of their plan, there's going to be 63 ground level parking spaces provided on site. And of course, the approval is contingent upon the petitioner obtaining the listed variance. The site itself is located in the Central Business District zoning district, which calls for 1.5 off-street parking spaces per each dwelling unit. So with 59 units, that works out to 89 off-street parking spaces required to meet the zoning ordinance's requirements. And as mentioned, the site only provides 63, so the petitioner therefore needs a variance to waive 26 spaces from the minimum required 89 off-street parking spaces. Thank you.
All right, any questions for, yes, Mr. Reddy?
I have a question. So I think the answer is that it doesn't matter, but the size of the units does not affect the number of parking spaces, correct? So even if they were quite a bit larger, it would still be 1.5, or if they were smaller, it would still be 1.5. Okay, thank you.
Alex, and maybe this is, how many affordable versus market rate units are going to be on this site?
I would defer that to the petitioner directly.
Mr. Moore and then Mr. Go ahead.
Is overnight parking allowed in this parking lot here?
The way I would interpret this is that in order for staff to include the minimum amount of parking provided, it does need to be provided on their own private property. Residents or visitors to the apartment complex could, of course, park here, but I would not include that as parking provided. I guess to answer your question specifically, no, but I wouldn't bank on that.
Okay, thank you.
Has the board, in the recent past, last 5 years or so, granted parking waivers for downtown residential? How common is this?
Last year, they did grant one on South Lafayette, but of course, I would advise the board not to necessarily look at past precedents as you come to a decision.
Mr. Lineweber.
When this project was presented to the Planning Commission, there's a number of issues that would have required a variance had they come straight to us, correct? The setbacks, et cetera?
Well, the Planning Commission, they do have the ability to waive certain requirements of the zoning ordinance. One of those things is setbacks. They also have the ability to waive certain height limitations as well. So that was all discussed at the Planning Commission meeting. And they did approve the building in terms of its scaling and placement on the property, as you see in your packet.
So in their approval, though, they exclude parking, or is that by statute that the parking is a separate issue?
Well, the parking, that's not something that the Planning Commission has the ability to waive during their site plan and special land use approval. In order to waive the minimum amount of parking spaces, then that, of course, they would have to come before you at this board.
I see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, if the petitioner is present, you may come forward.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name's Stephen Dronin with Lockwood Companies. We've been working on this development here for quite a long time. At least the last year has been in active discussions with various city bodies and county agencies and state agencies and things like that. So what we've come up with is a really exciting mixed income development project. So to answer one of the board members' questions, it is approximately a 50-50 mix of affordable and market rate. So we have 31 affordable apartments and 28 market rate apartments. We have 63 parking spaces in the building. So that's one floor that's half a floor underground and one that goes half up, and then the residences are above that. We looked at a lot of different schemes trying to balance cost versus just a way to work with what is a really tight, challenging site, in trying to maximize the amount of affordable housing that we could fit on this site. There's a reason you don't see a lot of affordable housing and or mixed income housing in really desirable communities like Royal Oak, and it's for challenges like this. It's very difficult to find a site that works. We're very fortunate here to have identified this site and have had a lot of support from our partners in city government and at the county and at the state. But now we're trying to put the rest of the pieces together and get this to start construction hopefully sometime this summer. So the last big piece on the zoning side is the question that's in front of you today, which has to do with the parking challenges. I think our architects have done a pretty outstanding job of maximizing what they can fit on this site, but there are constraints. It's very narrow. Typically, you would want to be able to kind of do a scissor ramp where you have one up, one down, but it's so tight that you can't really move between the floors here. It also has issues where if we were to go up, now we're starting to raise the actual maximum heights of the building, changing construction types. If we were trying to go down, our soil investigations have found a very low water table at this location, so it's about 6 feet below grade. So if we're going to go any deeper than that, all of a sudden we start to not only add the cost of that, but we add a lot of expensive pumping and engineering solutions to solve some of the water table issues. It's further squeezed in by overhead utility lines that we're trying to work with DTE and the city on some solutions to bury those lines and try to add some more space to the site. So there's a lot of challenges that I think we've risen to try to solve, and just wanted to put that in front of you and just get your thoughts and opinions, and hopefully you understand and agree with us that this is a great way to help provide more housing in Royal Oak. Our architect is here as well if you have any specific questions for that. Jason Krieger can answer those too, and I'll be here for any other questions you have.
Mr. Moore?
Yeah, I actually have two questions. Will the parking be assigned, or is it first come, first serve, whoever gets home first kind of a situation?
Excellent question. We're still working through that. The thinking is assigned. Just because you cannot move between the two floors. You have to come in, one entrance goes up, one entrance goes down. What we don't want is folks coming in, circling, trying to back out. So if they know, hey, this is my spot, and they go directly to that one, we think that's the best way to maximize that use.
Okay. And I noticed in your letter that you have a statement here that affordable housing generally results in a lighter parking footprint than market rate developments. Mm-hmm. What is your basis for that, and do you have any data to substantiate that statement?
Yeah, it's usually kind of on a case-by-case basis. So I'm really talking universally speaking. Market rate developments, you usually start to see a lot more two-car households than you do in affordable developments. So while I don't have a specific support for that statement, it's a fair question to ask. That's more of just kind of a general observation.
Okay. Mr. Wolf?
So I actually work for a different jurisdiction, not in Oakland County, in affordable housing. So I'm very interested in what you guys are doing here. So I'm going to ask some questions that might be a little bit technical, but just bear with me. But what are the AMIs that you're going to be having for that?
So everything is 60% AMI and below. So we have some at 60%, and then if we want to get even more technical, there are home units. So we have some at the 50%, home high and home low. So generally 60% and below.
And then besides home, are you using any other federal or state funds?
We are working with state funds, so the low-income housing tax credit is putting the bulk of that resources together. And then the city of Royal Oak has provided some ARPA funds, which are COVID relief funds essentially, as well as Oakland County Housing Trust Fund has also put in similar resources.
Okay, that's really great to hear. I'm actually really happy to hear that. I guess the other question is, are the affordable units going to be mixed in with the market rate units?
Yeah, completely indistinguishable.
That's really important to know.
This unit's affordable and this is market rate. They're all there.
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So Mr. Bastian and then Mr. Reddy. No, I'll go with that.
How many residents do you anticipate living in these units? Just rough ballpark figure. I mean,
Yeah.
we have 59 units. Well, I suppose the first question would be, what's the makeup of 2-bedroom versus 1-bedroom?
Perfect. Yep, that's where I would start too. So it's 44 one-bedrooms and 15 two-bedrooms. So if we assume all the one-bedrooms have one person and the two-bedrooms, maybe they have 1.5. A lot of that's going to be 2 people. A lot of it's one person plus an office or extra space like that they want to have in there. So if it's 1 for every 1-bedroom and 1.5 for every 2-bedroom, doing math in my head, I think that's high 60s, like 67 total people.
Okay. As I look at it, 1-bedrooms 44, 2-bedrooms 15. If we say 2 persons for every 2-bedroom,
Sure.
just for the sake of round numbers,
Fair question.
that comes up with 74 people, which, as you've already mentioned, sometimes having other than market rate units drives less traffic. My other question would be, how many of these parking spaces will be handicapped spaces?
I think we have that in our pack. Is it 2? Yeah, there's 2.
Okay.
That meets code, by the way.
What's that? I'm sorry?
That complies with code, so there's 2.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Chrisman?
When I've seen other parking reduction requests in the past, usually the applicants provided some sort of evidence that other developments they have, for example, don't require as much parking as the ordinance requires. Or do you have anything that'll give me peace of mind that won't be cars spilling out, parked on the street?
Yeah, that's fair. I'm trying to think what actual evidence I could have, because I understand exactly the question you're asking. And a lot of our stuff is not downtown urban developments necessarily. So a lot of those, we have ample parking for them. Depending on which jurisdictions we're working with, we're sometimes being pushed the opposite direction. So for instance, we're doing one in Ann Arbor who's pushing us for a lower parking count. They want 1-to-1. And we had 4 extra spaces, and they said, "Can you get right back to exactly 1-to-1?" So it really changes. I know Jason's done a lot more.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jason Krieger with Krieger Cloud Architects. I was just going to say, while I don't have any kind of hard evidence per se, just about, I think every single apartment building that we've done in and around the downtown Royal Oak area, Billings Place, Elevate, I have a list, but I didn't bring it with me, but none of them are park per ordinance. They were all special land use or variances, and they're all anywhere from, these are market rate, so different product, usually more 1.5 or 2-bedroom units, and they're all anywhere, I think Billings Place is 1.25 or 1.3, the one on Lafayette's 0, Elevate I think is 1.3, so they hover around that range, and that's a trend that you're seeing, right? The trend is, in your line of work, I'm sure you're seeing it. The trend is, 2 to 1.5, and now they hover between 1. If you're in a more urban area like Detroit, 0. Ann Arbor, 0. But required, but people try and do 1-to-1. That seems to be the thing to do. So I think it's experience, and I think it's up to the owner to say this is what we need, this is what's going to work. Because at the end of the day, you're operating it, you're managing it. You want to make sure that your tenants are happy and everything else.
Yep.
Mr. Lineweber?
Did you look at the project kind of the other way around and said, okay, if I've got X number of parking spaces, how many units can I support? Because really it's one floor, I guess, is the burden that, if you went by the ordinance strictly 1.5 units or spaces per unit, if you kind of go backwards, that's roughly what you're looking at. So did you look at it from those standpoint?
We did, and there's a lot of things that go into that, and a lot of it is the economics of making a deal balance. So if we were to have to cut 26 apartments essentially out of the development, it just doesn't work. I can't build it at all, unfortunately. So yes, we looked at it, but I don't have a project that way.
Well, one floor would have been 15 apartments, not 26, so...
Yeah, I think I misanswered that. I was going back to if the variance request is asking for 26 less spaces, but yeah, you're correct.
Other questions?
Can I follow up?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
The site currently is parking.
Correct.
There are, how many spaces there currently?
It's going to be pretty similar. Do you have off the top of your head? It's in the 70s.
You can scroll to the current. It's on that computer. The current site plan. I don't remember the count.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was I know I saw a existing site plan somewhere.
See,
There you go.
21 on each side, so 42.
So the impact of this project is those spaces offline, plus the load of potentially some other, if 1.5 is the number, then those spaces
That's
get
private
filled.
parking.
It is private.
It's private, it's owned by
Yeah.
by Mr. Nahat, so he's owned that for a very long time. In fact, there's signs out there that say permit parking only, basically. So I'm sure that they're for tenants of his in town, something like that. But I suppose you could park there at your own risk, but it is privately owned.
And he's on the development team, right? Or he's part of his name, I
So
thought.
I
was-
actually, no, I don't think so. I think you guys are
No,
fine.
we have to list the owner of the
Ah,
property.
I
so,
see.
No.
Because I recall a lawsuit from him about lack of parking, so this is kind of ironic, I
No
suppose.
comments.
Yeah, just the one thing I want to point out, I gave you guys a handout, and it just illustrated a couple of the hardships with the site, which is, the one is DTE, which Stephen mentioned. And so we highlighted where the lines are currently, and the thing about those power lines is you need to keep 16 feet away from the power lines. So we have to bury them, which is a huge financial impact for the project, but required. This site, it's very unique in the sense that you have, I think it's Hamilton Court, that's on the north, but that's where the DTE lines are. So you would have to peel back 16 feet that you can't build in if you left the power lines. On the east side, it's a property line, so it's not a right-of-way. So you cannot put windows or anything in there, which is why we're stepping the building back. On the west side, it's a property line as well. Even though it's a parking lot, it's actually a property line. So you guys are speaking with the city about trying to figure out some kind of a right-of-way or whatever you guys are doing. The only real public right-of-way that's free and clear is along 3rd Street. So I think that's one of the main reasons why this site's been vacant for so long. It's challenging to make it actually, as developers would say, pencil out. So through a lot of creative financing and things that you've been doing, we've been at this for a long time. You're able to kind of make it work, and this is the last step in all these processes to make this happen. So.
Mr. Wolf.
Last question again. This is for the affordable, the people living in the affordable housing units. Are their utilities going to be included in the rent? Or are they getting vouchers? Kind of, I guess, more for my colleagues here who don't work in affordable housing. If you can maybe explain a little bit more of what they might be getting in the rent, why the affordable is there, why the mixed income, and kind of in a 35,000 feet,
Sure.
if you will.
Sure. So the utilities are not necessarily included in their rents, but the way that the LIHTC program, which is the low-income housing tax credit through the state, works is you have a total housing spend, maximum spend that residents are allowed to make, and then you have to subtract out what they would pay in utilities. So their actual rent has to be cap minus utilities, and then that's the rent that they pay. So that the rent and their utilities do not exceed 30% of their median income at that level.
So again, this is just for the record. You're essentially saying that the people that are going to be living there are income based, and then on top of that, if my colleagues or I that we live in market rate and we have a $1,000 DTE bill, they're not going to be subsidizing that. They only pay what they owe, and then they can just live there, and obviously, that's it. So
100%. Yeah, that's right.
Any other questions? Ms. Robinson?
Excuse me. Oops. Get that on. What happens if the money that the subsidy or whatever to make it affordable went away? I mean, is this simply state funded? I'm hearing you keep saying some Michigan things. Is it not federal in any way?
It's federal, but it's
But
passed
to the
through to the
state.
state. So
I guess
that's-
I'm just thinking, what would happen if what would you have to do as, quote, the landlord of the building to make it work?
So in the event that the low-income housing tax credit program in general went away, it would be massive disruption, not just to this project, but to every one that's been built with this since 1986. So I don't want to say it's impossible because odd things are, try to stay out of the political space here, but I understand that the question of federal resources, what happens to these deals if that goes away. And I think it's safe for me to say that once the financing is closed and the development's built, that's pretty securely in place. Outside of something I completely unforeseen black swan event that I can't think of.
Mr. Lineweber, then we'll go to this one.
You've identified some of the unique aspects, I guess, of the site with the proportions and that sort of thing. You mentioned a low water table. I think you mean high water table. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you, you do have the geotechnical information that supports the findings that you said it's like 6 feet or whatever the...
Yeah, and we're happy to provide that, yes.
Okay. And then have you received feedback from the neighbors on this project?
There have been a few people who've come out. We've held neighborhood meetings before the Planning Commission, and that was sparsely attended. There was a handful of folks. We did send postcards out to everybody within 400 feet of the property and just invited them to a one-off session there. But everybody who did come was supportive. And then at the Planning Commission, there was a mix. I think there were 2 or 3 people opposed, and then probably 5, 6, 7 people in support. So generally kind of a mixed, but some enthusiastic support, and then some folks who just said, probably not the right fit for this location. So not super contentious, but they're there.
Mr. Christian? Oh, I thought I saw your hand.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Any other questions? I do, and forgive me for my ignorance. How long do you have to keep it affordable income as a facility for those units?
Sure, it's a minimum of 30 years.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like 5 years
No.
and you can pull the wool over.
Nope.
Okay.
There's just one other thing. Just, we talked about the people that are parking there now. It's a private parking lot. It's by permit or whatever. We have no idea how many people park there. How many people would we be displacing with this development?
In terms of parkers, I would probably only have anecdotal evidence for you. Every time I visit the site, it's very sparsely populated at all. I'd say maybe a quarter of that is full at the most I've ever seen. But that's just observational.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll open up public hearing. You may come forward and speak for or against this. And don't all rush. You go ahead.
Hello, I'm Alex Morford. I'm a Royal Oak homeowner, and I'm a volunteer lead with EMB Oakland County. I'm here tonight to request you join me in supporting the parking variance for 401 East 3rd Street. Downtown Royal Oak is one of the best places to live in Oakland County without a car, but market rate rents are too high for many of our community members to afford. The attainable units in this project will help share our wonderful community with more people. What makes downtown Royal Oak such a nice place to live without a car is the number of places that can be reached by walking, biking, or riding the bus. I think most of you are quite familiar with walking and biking around downtown Royal Oak, but I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with transit options, so I want to talk a little bit about that. I rode bus 430 down Main Street to get here tonight. I live on the north side of Royal Oak near Clawson. The bus stop that I get off at is at 11 in Main. There's actually, I guess that's like a 5-minute walk. There's actually 3 routes with bus stops closer than that. The 730, the 740, and the 492 all have bus stops at Troy and 11 Mile. Between those 4 routes, you can get to cities including Rochester Hills, Troy, Grosse Pointe Woods, St. Clair Shores, and Detroit, and that's without even having to transfer. This is one of the locations in Oakland County with the best transit access. In conclusion, due to the walkability, bikeability, and transit access of this location, many residents will not need a car. For the residents that do, this petitioner is still providing 1 parking spot per unit. Please put the needs of people over parking and approve this variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on this? Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Sullivan. I operate a chiropractic clinic on 4th Street. It's 311 East 4th. I've been there for 42 years. And we already have a big problem with parking in the neighborhood. I I come and go every day, and I see parking on Knoll Street, parking on 3rd Street, and parking, we have a problem with people parking in our parking lot, which is private, 8 spaces. And I know a few years back, the zoning was changed on 4th Street to include it was classified as downtown business district from what it used to be. And there's a couple things. That changed the required amount of parking spaces for the businesses. So, and I know there's a new building, fairly new, where the Cooper Tire sign is up on Knowles and 4th. They park across the street in the Ace lot or the CVS lot, and so do other people that have businesses on 4th Street. So there's already a glut of parking. Too many cars and not enough spaces. I don't know why they don't use a city, walk from the parking structure, but maybe it's free to park on the street, at least for certain hours. Anyway, so I'm not for this. And the other thing, I see this beautiful new courthouse, and to me, it seems like you're putting a building up the courthouse will now be in the shadow of that all day. And the new city hall, there's parking here, but it's really for the city hall, right? For the most part. So and I'm not sure, my site near 4th and Troy was an underground leaking storage site. They call it a lust site. So the groundwater was contaminated, and we went through years of remediation to fix that. And I know if you still dig there, you smell gasoline. They don't quite ever clean them up. I guess the point is there is quite a high groundwater level there too. And I guess that's my point. I don't see if there were a parking structure here, I may feel differently about it, but people aren't going to walk to that distance to park. People park and walk downtown for the events, like we just had the Winter Festival. So that's my big complaint, is there's already a problem with parking, and that we don't have this extra capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next.
Hi, my name is Katie Wook. I live on North Pleasant Street. I own a home there. I'm also a volunteer lead for EMB Oakland County. That stands for Yes in My Backyard. We're in a housing shortage nationwide, but also here in Oakland County, and we need more affordable units, especially downtown. For people who work downtown, who might not even need a car, or who share a car, for example. I live near downtown. I have 3 people in my family. We share 1 car. This building is walking distance to all of downtown, to businesses on 4th Avenue, to transit stops downtown. You could even get all the way to Chicago by walking to the Amtrak station. This is the perfect place for workforce housing. We need affordable units, and this is right in City Hall's backyard. This is the perfect place to show Royal Oak's commitment to affordable housing and being open to everyone. And just on a personal note, my dad works in downtown Royal Oak. He's a teacher at St. Paul Lutheran, right over there. And he would qualify for these units. And when I told him that there was an affordable building going in right here next to City Hall where he could walk to work every morning, you might see him 6 o'clock in the morning, he walks out here in Centennial Commons Park for exercise before he goes to work at St. Paul. And the look on my dad's face when I told him that there might be an affordable building going in downtown Royal Oak, he was so happy. So that means so much to me that someone I love could live here in downtown Royal Oak in an affordable unit, someone who could walk to their job, who already spends so much time walking around downtown Royal Oak. And again, as Alex mentioned, there's still 1 parking space, at least 1 parking space for every unit in this building. This is not a complete disregard for parking, and we need affordable units, and this is a majority affordable building. So I hope that you will join me in supporting this. Thank you.
Hi, I wasn't going to get up. My name is Peggy Sullivan, and I am part owner with my husband, the chiropractor. I just want to point out two things. You have Barton Towers and another affordable housing high-rise in the city, right? I think. No answer. I think there's other affordable housing, but there isn't. Just one more comment about the parking. You're getting rid of about 21 spots. And you're displacing 21 spots, and then you're creating the need for, who knows, if it's just 59. But I'd like that to be pointed out too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, George Gomez, 2018 Guthrie Avenue, Royal Oak. I wanted to take this moment to share with you a story that I've come across recently. If you're familiar with the complex at the northeast corner of 12 and Rochester Road, it's an apartment building that's been there, complex has been there for quite a few years under the old rules with additional parking. And what I'm experiencing recently is I have, unfortunately, a friend who is pretty much homebound, and in order to visit her, I have to be able to find a parking spot there, to stop by and deliver food or take her to other places. And what I've noticed recently, in the last couple months, they just posted no parking for other than residents. And the reason for it, and this, by the way, is a complex that has some Section 8, so some supported people, as well as just other residents. And there's a mix of 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom. And what's happening is there isn't any space for anyone else to come in. For whatever the belief is that we don't need cars or people aren't going to have cars, the residents themselves are starting to take up what used to be guest spots. And this is a complex that used to have the additional spaces available. So I even asked the apartment complex, where do you expect us to go? We're trying to be helpful. We're trying to visit people, seniors, otherwise, friends, maybe even have a guest once in a while. Their answer is no. There's just no spaces, and I agree with them. The residents should have priority. But that means I have to go a block and a half away if I even want to stop and help. So I just wanted to share with you that that's the story that's going on every day now. So I do appreciate this complex. I'm not against it. I think they've made a great effort at trying to have enough spaces. And fortunately for us, they're right across from the City Hall parking lot or in front of the police station. So other than losing those additional spaces to other people that might be for farmers market, other business with the city, that's the risk that you're taking. And I think you started hitting on it earlier. When you look at the number of bedrooms, and that's what I'm dealing with at 12 in Rochester, in my opinion, is there's more adults sharing spaces. It's not just a parent and a child, that these spaces are going to be used up. What's being accounted for just doesn't add up at this point. But again, if the city's not bothered by it and them taking up their lot, or the police station is in trouble with what's in front or farmers market, I'm going to be the last one to tell you not to do it. But I just wanted you to know that we're already having to struggle with just additional spaces in places that did have the 1.5 or the 1.3 at one time for allowable space. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on this case?
Hi, Joe Stevenson, Kenilworth Avenue in Royal Oak. As a pro-car, pro-transit, pro-affordable housing, I'm excited for a mixed income development such as this one. I know Detroit is not the best example of a mass transit city. I know it's not a best example of what we could be with a less than average car dependency, but I have faith that we could be going towards that. A car at a minimum costs $150 a month for the privilege to drive, and that's just insurance alone. People who are looking for these sorts of affordable housings might not necessarily want to spend or commit $150 just to do insurance, right? And that, let alone accident history or driving history, right? Typically, the cost can be greater than $300 a month, right? That's tax, insurance, registration, finance charge. That's everything, So for affordable housing like this is quite important, right? people don't necessarily want to own a car or need a car. In fact, they are fine relying on, say, 461, 462 fast to get to downtown Detroit, right? There are options in Royal Oak. This is actually probably the best example of mass transit in Metro Detroit. And I think this is quite the best opportunity for this sort of development. As an anecdotal thing, as a grandson to aging grandparents, this is definitely a net positive to people who want to downsize, but still maintain a life in Royal Oak, right? For people who are retired but don't want to lose their Royal Oak City life, right? These people are typically, trying not to go to assisted living or to a ranch or somewhere where there's lack of social mobility, right? Being in downtown is great for the ability to be a part of the city still, right? Especially for those who can't drive anymore. Anyways, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on this case? Going once? Going twice? All right, we'll close public comment. As stated before, we don't have a full board because someone had to recuse themselves. They'd always probably have to recuse themselves. Do you want us to go ahead with this or not?
If you don't mind, yes.
Okay, we will bring it to the side of the board. Discussion and or motions by anyone? Mr. Wolf.
I'll make a motion to approve in full.
Okay, is there a second? I think I saw Mr. Lineweber's hand. Go ahead, Mr. Wolf.
Again, I work in affordable housing for another jurisdiction in Metro Detroit. I'm all for affordable housing in, especially in downtown Royal Oak. I mean, Royal Oak in general, I think it's very important, and we've discussed before that everybody, regardless of their income level, should have a right to be here. And to answer a couple of questions, and I know the developer did already, the federal funds and the state funds that are being passed through to the city and to the county are, again, it would take such a hard, event that for those to go away. So I'm not worried about your financing. I'm assuming that if you're going for a LIHTC deal, then you obviously know what you're doing. At the same time, I agree with, some of the other people that have spoken that maybe if you're one person living in a you only need one car, or maybe you don't need a car. So I love seeing more density downtown. Fun fact, I actually lived across the street when I first moved back to Michigan about 5.5 years ago. And so I always wanted to see this this parcel being developed, and I think that the plan that's put in front of us is it'll look good, and I think it'll be quite equitable too. So I'm enthusiastically for this one.
Mr. Lineweber.
Yeah, I think the developer has demonstrated the best effort to put as much parking within this complex as they can. And if you went strictly by the number of units that the ordinance would support, there would be no project here. So there is definitely a hardship. The unique aspects of the site are its dimensions, the proportions. The narrowness of the site doesn't allow for a return flow in the parking, so it's always, you're coming in from a door and either going down or coming in from another door and going up. There's no opportunity to increase the parking to an upper level, nor the lower because of the water table issue in the downtown. I think the impact on the city and downtown as a whole would be quite positive from this development. There is overflow parking in the area, whether it's the immediate City Hall area or the parking decks that are, I know, a block or two away, but still available for visitors. And certainly this is not a self-created issue. The site has been sitting there vacant or lightly used for many years with other proposed developments that have not come to fruition. So I think what we have here is one that can, and I enthusiastically support.
Okay. Other comments? Mr. Bastian, and then Mr. Reddy.
Over and above my personal bias towards development projects that support affordable housing. I really feel like this truly meets the letter of what we're looking to do. I see how the restrictions unreasonably prevent the owner from using this property. I see that the variance does substantial justice not only to the petitioner but also property owners in the area. I definitely see the plight of the landowner being due to unique circumstances, and that the hardship has most importantly not been self-created. So I will definitely be in support of this enthusiastically.
Mr. Reddy?
Yeah, I'm also in support. I think the case has been laid out pretty well, but I just have a few things to add. For Section A, regarding the reasonableness of this standard, I think it is a bit out of date, and there are more people now who prefer to take public transit, walk, bike, and I know that it is practical here in downtown Royal Oak and in the surrounding area. And the bus service here is excellent. And I think there's also going to be a self-selecting factor, which is the unit has one spot per, or 1.1. So if you require 2 cars, you're probably not going to move there. So the people who are going to want to move there maybe are people who work downtown and won't need a car. So there's going to be some percentage who don't need a car at all. There's going to be some couples who only need 1 car. So I think that would bring I think holding it to 1.5 is unreasonable. I think it will do substantial justice to the neighborhood. And one thing that wasn't mentioned here but was brought up in planning is that some residents mentioned that they would look forward to this by keeping things quieter when there are festivals. I think the building might block the sound and also take up some of the space. So I think that's good. We haven't heard a lot of comment opposed. So there's also justice in having people being able to work and not have to drive into work. So if you work in downtown, you could live here and not have to drive and park. So that's something to consider. Yeah, I think the uniqueness of the lot has been mentioned, and yeah, it's not the hardship has not been anyone presently petitioning.
All right, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about this, and I'm on the fence on this one because we're considering the people that live in the development, but we're not considering the people that come to visit. And, being in a area like downtown Royal Oak tends to bring a lot of visitors. I even have people come to my home because of where I'm located. And I think that we need to consider parking for visitors as well. If they can't rely on having available parking here in City Hall, which is what we heard earlier, that cannot be considered, you're asking that people are going to walk across the park to a parking structure, or are they going to start parking in the neighborhoods and some of the other business lots wherever they can find parking? So in my mind, that's also a consideration, that you have 60 some people living here, we'll just say 1 per unit. If they have visitors over, where are they going to park? And that's why I'm on the fence on this one.
Ms. Robinson.
I'm really on the fence on this one. It's a beautiful building. I think it does go with the neighborhood as far as going with this new city hall, the police department. I mean, it looks good. I love the idea that it's affordable housing. We need affordable housing so bad in Royal Oak. I'm a native. I grew up here. I mean, I've been here my entire life. It does worry me about the parking. And we keep doing this and keep doing variances and letting this go and letting that go. And we're hurting ourselves. It's like cutting your nose off of your face in spite of what you're doing. It's going to roll over, and it's going to not only hurt the people that are the relative or the family people that are coming to visit, family, friends, but also even the businesses or anybody else that wants to use the area for other things. And I just think this is just too small of a piece for too big of a building. I wish there was some way we could make this work to have, that the restriction wasn't there, that we have this variance there that's saying you have to have 1.2 or 1.5 parking spots. I kind of think we need to look harder on this one.
You had a comment, Mr. Chrisman, or no?
I'll kind of second what was said before me. I'm pretty hesitant on this one. I really like the project overall. I like the goals of it. I like that they're aiming to bring affordable housing into the city. I think that's great. And I do see that they have hardships on the property, specifically cited as the high water table, but I'm having trouble connecting that to why specifically the parking variance is necessary. Because the way I see it, if they had fewer units, they wouldn't need the variance to begin with. And it seems like they just need that number of units to make the financing work, which is outside our purview.
I did have a question for staff real quick, with either one of you jumping in. This is not a situation where if we approved it, they could all of a sudden pull the carpet out and switch it from affordable housing to regular market rate housing at all.
I would point out that the income levels of those who may or may not live here shouldn't be a factor in coming to a decision on this variance request.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Wolf.
Just to answer that question really quick, I know from in taking in what Alex said, I'm just saying from a legal kind of perspective, if they were to pull out the financing, they would have to go both to the state and to the federal government to get that permission, and that would be again, and I'm saying this in my professional work, we've seen that before. There are lots of lawyers and lots of years involved in that, and that very rarely gets granted. So just to answer your question.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? All right. I'm torn. I'm on the fence because I agree. Part of it is if they had one less floor, they would barely need any variance on this one. But I also agree with what's been said in the public, which is the city hasn't complained about the excess parking that this would be taking up. And the only public that we had come before us in giving comment, including the emails in here, was a business owner. We didn't have any residents nearby come in to be against nearby the parking regarding this. We only had a business owner come by to concern about that parking. So because of that, I'm a little bit more siding of probably going with the variance request, because you don't have those affected nearby, the exception of one business owner, really concerned with the possible impact this may do upon more traffic, more parking in their areas, and more likely than not, the excess parking would be taken up by here in the parking lot here of visitors coming by. So that's where I'm probably going to more likely go to vote in this variance. Yes, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, there were at either the planning commission or the city commission, one of the two, there were neighbors that came by that did speak out against this, including the person directly across the street and others that were in the neighborhood behind. So.
And I understand that, but that was for that whole thing.
Sure.
I also have to understand if they didn't come before us today, I don't know why then and not now. So I have to go by what I can see right now, as well as what was submitted with the comments for this. So that's only how I can personally. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your hands. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll be the only one.
Okay. Motion carries. Congratulations. Best luck to you. All right. We'll give a moment, allow Mr. Klatt to get brought back into the board here. And looks like we have Mr. Chrisman may have to use the restroom real quick, so we'll take a quick break.
Take a break?
2-3 minutes break. We'll start back up in 2-3 minutes.
Isaac, nice to meet you. Yeah, welcome aboard. I would think about if my dog saw somebody coming in there.
Oh, you get shot.
All right, we'll move on to case number 25-02-02 for, what was it? 436 Detroit Avenue. Whenever you're ready, take it away.
The subject site is located on the south side of Detroit Avenue within the one-family residential zoning district. And the site itself is already developed with an existing single-family dwelling, and there's also an attached garage located towards the rear of the property. The petitioner is proposing to expand the ground floor area, specifically on the first floor around the attached garage, with a staircase which leads to a second-story addition, which is located directly above that attached garage. On face value, I guess it could be seen that the petitioner is proposing a separate dwelling unit, but staff did not view it as such, primarily down to the fact that the addition is not going to be accessible from the garage itself, and the singular staircase is not going to be directly accessible from any new exterior doors. On top of that, staff felt the proposal with the elements of a bathroom, kitchen, or bedrooms could almost be similar to an instance where someone wanted to add that to maybe finish a basement or something similar like that. Putting all that aside, in any case, the proposal still increases the total usable floor area of the house itself. And the zoning ordinance caps the total usable floor area for single-family houses to no more than 3,500 square feet. The existing house in its current configuration is currently at 2,840 square feet, and the addition results in a total usable floor area of 4,178 square feet. So the petitioner is just seeking the one variance to waive the 678 square feet from the maximum allowable total lot coverage of 3,500 square feet. Thank you.
Any questions? Ms. Robinson?
Does that include the sunroom? That is the sunroom.
Correct, on the first floor.
On the first floor, and then the studio apartment over the garage.
Correct.
And that studio apartment is only accessible through the stairway?
The stairway, correct.
And
from
you
the
have to be
first floor.
outside to get to the stairway?
No, it's accessible from the first floor from the existing house. There's also a small sliding door from the sunroom as well.
Oh, okay, so you go to the sunroom, and then the sunroom, you go upstairs to the, I got it, okay. I couldn't figure that out. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Landweber?
So this plan as presented, there is no additional exterior door that that's shown on the plans?
Other than the sliding one from the sunroom, there's no direct door either from the garage nor from the exterior side going directly to the new staircase.
Is there a prohibition against them adding a door at some point in the future?
No, they could just pull a permit to do so.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just to clarify, looking at the plot plan, this won't bring the footprint of the building any closer to any lot lines than is currently, correct?
That's correct. On the side plane, it's going to follow the same side plane as what's already there on the east side of the house.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, if the petitioner is present, you may come forward, state your case.
Evening. I'm Dan Teff at 436 Detroit Ave, and this is my wife, Mesa Teff. So we're obviously trying to expand our house and add a second floor to our existing garage. And this is primarily to give us the ability to add more of like a multi-purpose room because we have a baby on the way and we're hoping to expand further. Our immediate family is not anywhere near us. So this does give us the ability to have like your mother-in-law come and stay with us for a while and take care of the child and also additional children. Our schedule is quite hectic. I travel partially for work. I have limited ability to work from home. My wife is an ER physician who has done her residency here at Royal Oak, even during COVID. So her schedule is extremely tight. So obviously having like a mother-in-law or a relative come stay with us and help us is really beneficial. So that's why we have a full kitchen, a full bath up there. Obviously there's no intent to do anything further with additional doors or make that into like a separate apartment anytime in the future. But part of the reason why I think we're over the variance in square footage is because we need to add a hallway that it goes around to the staircase. There's no way to add another door directly to the second floor, just because the other option we looked at was on the second floor, which would involve going through our existing master bedroom and bathroom, which is not appealing to us, obviously for a variety of reasons. She sleeps during the day sometimes with her schedule, so this was the best option to make sure that we were like going all the way through to the second floor. So, and with that, We didn't want to just have a single hallway. We decided to just bump out a little bit because obviously having a hall that large to get to the staircase did not really sound appealing to us. But this also kind of enhances our view outwards, our use of our backyard. And we also think that it does enhance the view from our neighbors because the existing garage has no windows in the back. So you're looking at just like a flat garage right now, and it's rather ugly. And just for what it's worth, we did go approach our neighbors from immediately in front of us, immediately next to us, on each side, and also immediately behind us. All have signed a letter in support of this project.
Okay. Questions for the petitioner? Anyone? Mr. Klett.
Just a quick question. So I understand the need for the sunroom is really to get around to get to that staircase. But it seems like the primary addition here is the second story, right? That's the key piece.
Yeah.
Did you look at a way, I mean, is the sunroom simply a way to get there, or is that a desired feature as well?
Well, it is a desired feature. I mean, we've been working on this project for a while now, and obviously it's appealing to have some additional space as well, especially because right now, if you look at the existing view, our exterior to go outside, it's like very narrow and you can't see much of the backyard at all. So that does give us more of ability to enjoy our backyard.
The project sort of evolved as well. So, in thinking about where the staircase would go and how we would be able to put it in, we found that the only way is to do that walkway through the backyard. And then in looking at the walkway, we thought about, well, what if we made it more than a walkway? What if we made it more of a sunroom area that you could possibly enjoy as well, rather than just a path? The cost savings in being able to make it more of a sunroom and more of an enjoyable area for the backyard seemed beneficial to us. So I think that's sort of how it evolved from there.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Did you explore other options to, and it's hard to tell on the site plan, like for example, if you were to push the garage, you're building next to it, right? You're adding the staircase, you're adding square footage there.
Mm-hmm.
Could the garage slot down and could you add the staircase off the mudroom, adjacent to the garage in that area, instead of building all the way around it, which would reduce the square footage, reduce your variance request. Pardon?
Cheaper.
Yeah, just a thought. So I guess you've explored options. That was my main question.
Yeah,
Have you explored
we've
options to
explored
reduce that
options.
overall square footage by shifting the garage down to maybe tuck that stair in at the mudroom area?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Moore?
Is the sunroom and walkway space heated, or is it really just kind of seasonal space?
No, it would be fully heated.
Okay.
So,
It's part of the house. It's like a section of the house in that point, a walkway, because we want to be able to get to the upstairs without, feeling like we're walking outside, especially in Michigan, some of the colder months.
Okay.
So we wanted it to be more of like a four-season space that is heated.
Okay, and it looks like you're accessing that from your family room? Like there's going to be a doorway going in there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's already a doorway right there, and that just goes out right to the backyard. So that doorway would now lead to that walkway space.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Lionel?
In your existing garage, you're peeling the roof off, right, to do this? Are you also adding all those trusses that I see, the floor joists, or are those in there already? Do you know?
I do not exactly know. I mean, I know we're probably changing some of the trusses, but honestly, not exactly.
Generally, garages are not designed to support this, a loft like a second floor. They may be trusses or something, so
it's completely being taken down and it's being reinforced.
So you're basically rebuilding your garage, right?
Yeah.
Other than a couple of walls. Have you looked at just like rotating things or a different orientation on the site that wouldn't require a variance, but would still achieve the living space that you're looking for?
Our designer did look at the position of the existing garage. Obviously, we didn't build the home, we bought it like this, but we didn't see any way to reposition the garage and to keep the same size of the garage that we have today.
I see, okay.
Okay, I think I saw, no, okay, I'm sick then. Mr. Wolf and then Mr. Reddy.
So I just want to go back to something you said, and I just want to kind of dig into this a little further. So you're saying that this would be kind of a multi-purpose room, maybe a guest room, but it wouldn't be a mother-in-law suite or an accessory unit?
So our mother may stay there, but it would not be a long-term situation, so.
We were thinking, because we have elderly family as well. We have a great aunt that's 85 years old, and she might also need to stay at some point. So in addition to getting care for our children and our growing family in the future, it could also be used in the future for like an elderly suite that we could help some of our family members as they're getting older.
Okay, because I heard a mother-in-law suite, which is like an accessory unit, which is something completely different. So I just wanted to confirm that, but no, I get what you're doing now. Now that makes sense.
Okay, Mr. Reddy.
Yeah, so my question is, we have to find the 4 requirements, and the third is that there's something unique about the lot that causes this practical difficulty. That's what I'm struggling with a little bit. Could you help me with that? Where do you see the uniqueness of the lot?
So I think
causing
like
this?
the position, well, do as best as I can with this, but the position of the garage prohibits us from really accessing it in a different way. Additionally, I think, I don't know if this is lot necessarily, but just because of our master bedroom and the master bath is the only adjoining space to that, and we obviously don't want to disrupt that. I know that's more of the house existing uniqueness versus the lot, but.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Mr. Glatt?
More of a question for staff or for Alex. Alex, the setback on that side yard, which would be, that's at east, is that 10 feet? Do you know where the garage is, the garage side?
So the east side?
Yes.
Oh, that would be just be 5 feet.
Okay, I saw a dimension of 10 feet on the plan. I was just curious what that was. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, you may sit down and we'll open this up to public comment. Is there anyone here to speak for or against this for public comment? Please come forward. Going once? Going twice? All right, public comment for this is closed. We'll bring it to this side of the board. Any discussion and or motion? Mr. Clapp.
One last question. I saw the petition you sent over. Thank you for doing that with the neighbors. Is that your immediate neighbor that signed as well too? The one that would be directly impacted?
Each one next to us.
Okay.
And the 2 in front of us. And then there's one that is one next to behind us. The person directly behind us wasn't home.
Thank you.
Any discussion or motions? To get something going, Mr. Moore.
Yeah. I'll make a motion that we approve as requested.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, I mean, the practical difficulty here, I think, as they've mentioned, in the way that the house was built and the way that the lot size is, the garage is already there. It's at a very interesting angle that makes it a challenge. It's something they didn't do. I remember this house being built, and so for me, this makes sense that, looking at the plans, that's the only place they could put a staircase. And to keep it all internal, they seem to have done the best they could.
I will agree with all that. And the fact that the lot is so deep that you're using that space. And again, although this is a newer house, that's adding that more square footage isn't an unusual thing. Like when we wrote this 3,500, this was a huge house 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, which isn't the case anymore. So I see that, again, as functional obsolescence in what is actually built there. And the lot, size-wise, proportionally accepts that kind of square footage. And again, the garage is at such a weird angle without moving the garage, which you could, I guess, to change that. I understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Any other comments? Mr. Clark?
No, all good points. I think, I mean, the garage placement really is the practical difficulty here. It's an existing condition. You didn't create that. You know, my suggestion to push it down, it's pretty tight on the setback there regardless. And I think in any case, you're still going to have some overage here. So is it a little less? Possibly, but there's some added value, I guess, in the rear yard for the sunroom too, versus just pushing the garage over. And I don't even know if that would work, you know. That's a further study with their architect.
Mr. Wolf?
Yeah, when I first looked at this, my gut was like, what's the practical difficulty? But then I went and, you know, listening to you and kind of going through everything deeper, I definitely see the practical difficulty of the place, obviously having, you know, your family's far away, so that's kind of a practical difficulty in of itself. If you know, they may have to fly in or whatever and stay, so that's definitely important. And I think, you know, the sunroof, I think, is a nice addition. I'm not, obviously you guys are going to do what you want with your property, but if you were to sell it, it would be good to, you know, for other things and other people. And also, you know, that your neighbors are in favor of it, that's always a good sign as well. So, yeah, I'll be for it too.
Okay. Other comments? Mr. Lineweber?
Just not for or against necessarily, but they're looking for a waiver of 678 square feet. The staircase alone is roughly 70 by 7 feet times 11, 77 feet times 2 is about so you're roughly 150 square feet of that number is the staircase by itself. So effectively, it's a smaller ask really than the number may reflect. The kind of convoluted nature of the circulation around here is certainly unusual, I guess. And the garage is kind of the hub around everything. So that, I guess, looking at that garage, that's the practical difficulty for the project. I'm still a little bit on the fence on this one, so I look forward to other comment.
Okay. Mr. Grissom?
I'm just going to echo that. I mean, the holdup for me is the sunroom and the location of the stairwell, because it seems to me that they could have reconfigured it slightly, and while they still would have probably needed a variance to achieve the same goals, they could have requested a lesser variance. So that's a holdup for me.
Any other comments? I'm going to say I'm going to be in favor of this. A couple of things for the practical difficulty that have been somewhat mentioned already, but more I'll emphasize. This is a larger lot. It's 12,000 square feet. The practical difficulty there is that they're being held to the same circumstances a normal 6,000 square foot lot is held. Usually we've been a little bit more lenient on those larger lots. Not saying that we have to follow precedent, but that's just usually what occurs. Where they're adding on is to the back, so it's not going to affect anyone in the front. And as they brought up, they've got all their neighbors all the way around are in favor of this, as none are seeing that this is going to cause any hardship to their own property or any damage. And yes, could they have cut out a few feet here or there to not make the sunroom and just make it pure circulation? Yeah, but now you have a unusual space that has no purpose for it other than just circulation. At least now they're trying to create, with just adding a little bit of square footage, a nicer functional use of the space. So I don't want to penalize them for that. They're doing as best as they can with what they've been given. The biggest question is whether or not we should allow them to have a whether it be a mother-in-law suite or a studio on top of the garage, because that's basically what this is really the square footage is for, is whether or not we think we should allow them to grant that or not. looking at the fact that it's on a garage that's already there, you're not adding anything that's going to be obtrusive in the front anyway, so you're not really adding that much more footprint to the property than it already has. So because of all those unique hardships that I see and practical difficulties, that's why I'm in favor of this. Is there any other, Mr. Reddy?
Sorry, I was on the fence. I was taking a long time to come to my decision. And I think what Mr. Christensen said kind of turned me over, which is that I do think a lesser variance would do justice here, but that's where I'm at. Thanks.
Okay, that's fine. Any other comments? All right. Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. 5-4, the motion carries. Congratulations. Best of luck to you. Okay. Mr. Murphy's doing the last one. If it'll pop up on my screen. There we go. We are on to case number 25-02-03 for 2619 West 14 Mile Road and 2625 West 14 Mile Road. Mr. Murphy, whenever you're ready, you may take it away.
Good evening. These are two commonly owned properties. They have separate tax identification numbers and separate legal descriptions. They're located on West 14 Mile Road. And at the December 10th Planning Commission approval, they provided site plan and special land use approval in order to utilize the two buildings for a auto repair operation. There's a drive approach along West 11 Mile Road that leads to a central drive aisle, and the property boundary, as seen in the aerial photograph, that property boundary bisects that drive aisle. The drive aisle, as you can see from the photographs, is utilized in order to access parking spaces on both properties, and those parking spaces are accessed at a 90-degree angle from that central drive aisle. So zoning ordinance requirements apply to individual properties. If these two properties were combined into one new tax identification number and new legal description, there'd be no reason for them to be present tonight. They would comply with the approved site plan from the Planning Commission. They would not need to seek the variances, but the petitioner has elected to come before you to seek the variances that are necessary, and those include the drive aisle width, and I'll bring up the site plan to describe that better. So this is the approved site plan from the Planning Commission, and you'll see the central drive aisle from West 14 Mile Road, and there's a line that depicts the property boundary between the two. And the parking spaces are accessed, as I had indicated, at a 90-degree angle. Anytime a parking space is accessed on an individual property at a 90-degree angle, it requires a two-way drive no less than 20 feet wide. So the driveway for each property is certainly less than that. The combined drive aisle, the drive aisle that goes across, spans both properties, is a little more than 24 feet. So they are seeking a variance from the minimum required drive aisle width for both properties. And each of the buildings require a certain number of off-street parking spaces based on the activities within those buildings. The building at 2625 provides all of its required parking, but the building at 2619 only provides 9 spaces, and it's required to have 13 spaces. Again, the approved site plan, if it were one piece of property, there would be, so in essence, there's an excess of parking on 2625 and there's a shortage on 2629. If they were combined into one, they would meet the parking requirements. They would not be here today. So a reciprocal access and parking rights easement agreement while that's possible that the petitioner could put that in place, and that would cover the drive aisle, it wouldn't fulfill the requirements that the zoning ordinance standards apply to individual pieces of property. So it doesn't negate the fact that each of these sites needs to meet zoning ordinance provisions in and of itself. And compliance with the ordinance requirements were certainly triggered by the site plan approval from the prior uses to this auto repair operation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I saw Mr. Moore's hand first.
What would happen in the future if the properties were no longer commonly owned and somebody could, per se, put a fence along the property line? Because there was a situation with some buildings very close to where we're sitting tonight that had a similar situation to this, that I recall something like that happening. Would that then prevent access?
It certainly would, or it could prevent access entirely, or it could cause certainly a shortage in the number of parking spaces that are available, because you would only have access to potentially creating parallel parking spaces alongside each building. So it really drop the number of parking spaces available. It would also make it certainly challenging for larger delivery vehicles in order to access the site. And you're correct, those instances are unfortunate and they do happen periodically. The first phone call is always to the city to try and fix the problem, and this is one of the reasons that we try and alleviate potential situations like that, especially in a circumstance where the solution is relatively simple in combining the pieces of property into a singular piece of property.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chrisman?
So you kind of touched on it there at the end, and I don't know if I missed it, if it was more clearly explained at the start, but to me it just seems so obvious that the solution is to combine the parcels, so why can't they be combined?
Yeah, and I'll let the petitioner speak to that after, once we have questions for the petitioner, or during their presentation.
Mr. Reddy?
So if one of the parcels was sold, would they need to come before us again, or would the variances still be in effect?
Assuming the uses were the same or of a similar parking nature, we would probably administratively provide site plan approval, and it wouldn't come in front of you. So there's, without them being independent of each other, it's very difficult to predict what could happen in the future that might affect one or the other.
Ms. Robinson?
Could there be some kind of a deed restriction on there saying that they couldn't do that for that parking issue?
That's typically what you're referring to is an easement agreement for reciprocal purposes, for parking and for access. But it would prevent anyone from building along that easement agreement. So and the petitioner, I know, can speak to this.
Okay.
If that easement were put in place, it would limit the property owner's ability to redevelop that portion of the property. Yes,
Right,
in perpetuity.
Yeah. Right.
But again, it still
Okay, so you're doing
doesn't
an easement,
negate
yeah.
the fact that it needs the variance request.
Any other questions?
Yeah, if they did put such an agreement in place and they own both sites, they could also retract that agreement, is that correct?
There's nothing that would require them to notify the city that, we just get rid of that. Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Murphy? No other questions for staff, all right. Seeing none, the petitioner may come forward and present your case.
Hello, my name is Frank Frega. I'm the architect for this project and the petitioner on behalf of the owners and the proposed tenant operator of the business. There are a couple issues here that we would like to discuss and just kind of make sure that everyone understands. What we're dealing with here is two separate parcels that have existed in this state since they were constructed in 1961. These existing buildings are kind of pinned along their adjacent property lines. The only space to provide parking is the space that currently exists between them. And that space has existed in its current configuration since these buildings were constructed. This situation is not ideal. We certainly understand the issue with the property line. But again, this is an existing condition due to the physical limitations of the site that have been there for 60 years. It's been there before the zoning ordinance existed. So while we acknowledge that there is a technical issue here with the parking and the drive lane, there is no actual substantial issue here, because the way the project is proposed is both parcels are owned by one ownership. That owner can control what happens on both parcels. They can set up lease agreements, restrictions, easements to ensure that the drive lane and the parking that currently exists and is shared between both parcels can remain active and in effect and unencumbered by the actions of one party or another on either side. The other thing that we're dealing with on this particular project is there's one tenant. One tenant is going to utilize both buildings for this business. So that tenant isn't going to, go to his guys in the other building and say, you can't park here, you can't use my drive lane. That's just not a scenario that's going to happen in this project. So our concern here is, and Mr. Chikorian here can speak on, as the owner, I related to his concerns from his standpoint, but I think we're trying to solve what is a very minor technical issue in the ordinance in a fairly heavy-handed way of forcing him to combine these properties. There are other mechanisms that I think we can use, such as deed restrictions or an easement, that would solve this problem. And I would believe that the zoning ordinance and the off-street parking requirements would normally allow some shared parking between two or more uses or buildings or sites. And in this case, they're right next to each other. They're the same ownership and they're the same tenant. So I think there's a very low risk of any issue coming up here for this particular project. And with an easement, he can eliminate any risk from any future project. I know that, there's been sort of this, call it the worst case scenario example that's come up in this meeting and in the planning meeting, but that's not this project. That's not this owner. That's not the scenario here. And I think the owner and the tenant are doing what they can to be responsible and good business owners and citizens. And I don't know that it's exactly fair to suggest that that could happen or would happen on their site. In fact, I think they have a project here that would basically prevent that happening, given its use, given that it's one operator and it's one owner. So we're hoping that a different mechanism other than combining the lots can be agreed upon.
Mr. Moore has a, go ahead.
If it's the same owner and the same tenants, you basically state in your letter the owner does not wish to combine the lots. Why?
You want to speak?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Paul Chikorian. I'm the owner of this property. I also have my office in Royal Oak in the Howard & Howard building, longtime occupant of Royal Oak. So, when we acquired this property, it's two separate, obviously, parcels and two buildings. They're separated. That's all been discussed. This didn't even cross my mind as a potential issue. Now we have a tenant who's looking at the entire piece for himself. The problem with combining it is, number one, it's going to complete hardships or give me hardships in the future with potential options. If I ever wanted to sell one, which I don't see happening, but if I did, I can't. It's creating a potential parking lot issue if I ever want to redo the parking lot with the square foot grandfather water retention site. Who knows what other issues it could create for me. It's two pieces and it's been since 1961. I'm willing to do an easement. This tenant's going to be there for a minimum 7 years. He's got many options beyond that. And if he ever does move out,
we have to come in front of you again because any kind of change of tenant is a change of use. So this issue, if the easement doesn't satisfy everybody, it'll be in front of you again in 7 or 12 or 17 or 22 years. But I just don't want to combine the property. I think it would create a lot of issues for me one day, and it's going to make it less valuable. There's no other way to say it. If I ever go to sell it, it's going to make it less valuable, and it'll be worth less than I paid for it.
Okay, Mr. Chrisman, you had your hand up after Mr. Ward. Did he answer it?
I guess follow up to staff. I just want to make sure. So even if we went the route of the easement, that still necessitates all the variances, correct?
Correct.
So,
and an easement would prohibit anything from being built across it.
So the way I see it, on one hand, we have an easement and 3 variances, and on the other hand, the applicant just combines the parcels. So I guess that's where I'm at.
Mr. Wolf?
Did the planning commission, and I went and tried to look for the planning commission video or minutes, couldn't find them, but did the planning commission ask you to combine the parcels? And then a kind of side question for staff, would this have to go in front of us or another body, or would that be approved administratively?
There was a contingency of the planning commission to combine the pieces of property or to seek the variances.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. When we got the original pre-meeting comments, the request to combine the parcels was in there. We went forward. You know, I had some correspondence with the planning department about that issue. We could not necessarily come to an agreement on their request. You know, the owner has a preference to not do that, and so we submitted the plan as shown. And in the planning commission meeting, this topic did come up. We did, you know, try to push for a easement or some other mechanism to deal with this, and that was the one sort of sticky point here. Otherwise, the plan complies. We provide more than enough parking. It's this existing condition of the property line and the one shared drive lane between the buildings. So, you know, we are lucky that the planning department or the planning board was, you know, favorable to the project. They approved it, but they asked that we either combine the properties or come before you to seek a variance. And so that's why we're here today.
So just to confirm that if we were to deny this tonight, you would either go back to the drawing board or combine the parcels?
I think those are two of the options, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Clare?
Does this board even have the ability to request an easement as a condition?
I don't believe so, but Mr. Murphy can speak.
The board can require particular contingencies if they mitigate a situation. They need to be logical and applicable, but the variance request should be viewed in light of the criteria. So how do these 2 parcels, how do they meet the criteria for the hardship themselves? And if you believe that the board would like to make a motion to approve them based on the criteria, that they meet the criteria, and that you believe there's some contingency that would help bring some resolution to the condition of the site, you do have the ability to do that. The enforceability of that contingency could be questionable based on whatever the contingency is.
So like a shared access agreement or a shared drive, if you were to sell this, and easement's restricted, right? You can't, like you said, you can't build over it, but if he was to sell it, I would assume any person that were to buy this lot would want some kind of shared access to that drive. Otherwise, what do you do with it? It's pretty small from that standpoint. There's minimal parking, minimal drive areas. So and maybe this is more of a technical thing, but if you were to enforce a shared access of the drive upon sale, I would assume that's less limiting than an easement. But again, that's more legal talk than above my pay grade.
Yeah, I mean, from our standpoint, we've done the best we can with what we've got, right? This building has been here for decades before the zoning ordinance even existed. This isn't a new construction. This is sort of what we've got, right? These types of projects exist in every community around the country. They're super prevalent in downtown urban areas where you have buildings constructed on property lines, no parking is available. So zoning ordinances are typically flexible and allow some variance or some leeway to accommodate properties and, redevelopment or reuse of property so they don't sit there abandoned. This site is currently vacant. They have a tenant who's proposed a project. We've designed it. It's been approved. I think we're hoping that there's a way to do this without combining the properties, because as Paul said, once you do that, you can't undo it, because no board here in the city of Royal Oak is going to approve a lot split, because it's going to create the condition that exists now, right? No one's going to allow them to split this in some way that doesn't provide parking. And the issue that we've got is we've got two sites. They're both super small. They've been there forever. And unfortunately, you've got the largest building on the smallest property and the smaller building on the big one. So you're really stuck. The one on the corner, you could maybe get away with some use that would provide parking in the back. You could never provide parking in maybe one-way parking for that corner lot if you cycled through the lot and it came out on the other side street. The other building next door is never going to get any parking to work. It has one way in, one way out. So the only way to make this work is for them to kind of share cooperatively the parking setup. That's kind of what we're looking for here. We feel we met the spirit of the code. We're providing more than the required parking for this scenario. And we think that this can be resolved with a lease agreement.
Did you have a question still or no? It was answered. Okay.
This is more to staff, but who at the city reviews and approves combinations, and do you have an indication of whether this is likely to be approved?
For land combinations, those start at the assessor's office and they make their rounds to a whole host of offices, including all the different divisions in the community development department.
Do you foresee any reason why it would be denied?
A land combination?
Yeah.
I do not, from the planning division's perspective, no.
Okay.
Mr. Lineweber.
If the land was to be combined, are there other provisions? There was mention of water detention systems or other requirements that would then come into play if it were a combined site?
Not to my knowledge, no. The stormwater ordinance doesn't apply to sites that are less than 6,000 square feet and you're not disturbing any of the hard surface area. So if they didn't have to disturb the parking lot, there would be no stormwater ordinance triggered.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can speak to that. If these lots are combined, you will run into that issue. The amount of disturbed paving that will occur on this lot will exceed the threshold for the Oakland County requirements that are listed here. So that means unless someone's got an extra couple $100,000 sitting around to spend on a project and put underground storm detention system in, nobody's ever fixing the paving on the site. And so that's one of the other issues here that we're trying to deal with, is to allow the site to be developed and repaired and made usable without having to get into underground storm detention systems.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Nope. You go ahead, Mr. Reddy.
So, I think I'm having some difficulty with this. I think like a lot of us probably. But you said if they were combined and then you went to split it, no one would approve that. But in effect, you're asking us to approve this right now for the sake of the owner being able to sell one of the units, right? That's the reason why he doesn't want to combine them. So you're asking us to approve the thing that you said wouldn't ever get approved. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Our point is, this is existing. This is the way it's been for 60 plus years, and there's been no issue with it. As far as we know, there's been no actual issue with two different tenants fighting on the site. These are all hypotheticals at this point. None of this has happened, and it shouldn't happen in this current project because of just the nature of the project itself. One owner, one tenant, right? I think the issue becomes if you do combine it in the future, I don't think anyone would allow it to be subdivided because there's no way to subdivide it in a reasonable way that allows both sites to still have parking. Unless you were to maybe, if you did that, I think you would trap this project into a use that's something that requires no parking, a warehouse use. That's what this parcel would become. You could no longer develop it for a restaurant. You couldn't use it for an auto, detailing place. You would never be able to provide the amount of parking. So this is the perils from our end and from Paul's end. If you combine this and make this one parcel, there's no unwinding that in a reasonable way unless you tear down a building or completely redevelop the site.
Why couldn't you come to us and ask for the same variances that you're asking for right now when you want to split it? It seems like you'd be asking for the exact same variances, right?
Well, I suppose if that were the scenario, I suppose you would, but I guess what are the likelihood that that would happen in the future?
But you're asking us to do it now. So if you're saying it's impossible, then aren't you saying it's impossible?
I guess our concern is this has existed like this forever. Why all of a sudden now is it an issue? That's really the crux of this. And we understand that there is a technical issue here, but within the spirit of the project and the spirit of complying with the ordinance, we've done that. I'm sure this is not the only site in the city of Royal Oak that has an issue like this. Is every one of those sites going to be forced to combine their parcels? I don't know. If this were, let's say the project was slightly different where we were only proposing the use of one building and we came to you with here's a lease with a cross-access agreement from the adjacent property so that they're going to share the lots and the drive aisle, would that not be allowed? If it would be, why isn't it allowed now?
Well, if I could say something. If this were two separate owners now, would you force one of the owners to buy the other property? Because that's in effect what you're asking me to do, is saying, if there was two owners, you can't force someone to buy the neighboring property, so an easement would be the solution. An easement is the solution. It doesn't have to be combined. But to force me to combine it is going to create what I believe is more financial hardships, including a parking lot issue potentially that could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Aside from, and I don't anticipate selling, but this would prohibit me from doing that. So again, it's not the same as saying I'll have to come back to you and ask you to split it one day, because that would be against the code. This is something that's been added on after the property was constructed, and it's like you said, it's been this way for 64 years.
Mr. Moore and Mr. Leaf.
I think one of the problems that I'm having here is that you're using both for the same business. And I think I heard you say that if the property was combined, you couldn't build a restaurant here, and I don't understand that statement. Why would you not be able to build something else on this property if it was combined?
Well, I'm not saying if it was combined. I'm saying if you ever went to go split it again.
Okay.
I don't think anyone would allow it to be split because you would, because of the physical limitations of where the buildings are on the property, and that there's only so much space in between and around them, right? And we're struggling with this issue right now. If you were to create another divider line between these two sites, there's nowhere to put it where it would allow you to do a proper amount of parking for either site, unless you only did something that required no parking.
But you're using it as one business. That's right.
In this scenario, yes, it's one business, basically.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Wolf.
This is for the property owner. Have you ever had more than one, have you ever had two separate uses that are not related to each other on the site in the past since you've owned it?
Well, I just recently purchased it, but as far as I know, the business that was in there before the awning, it was the same thing. It was one owner for both. They used both buildings, and this is going to be very similar. It's going to be one tenant for both buildings. So no, I've never had two tenants in this property. But again, it's potentially feasible, but for many future years, we see that not being the case. It'll be one tenant, one user.
Yeah, I think the previous tenant or previous owner and use of this property they were using both buildings.
They were using both buildings.
So
the building on the right was the sales shop, and the building on the left was the fabrication shop.
Sure, and so what you're saying, and again, to your knowledge in the past, were there ever two separate uses on the site? to your knowledge. And if you don't know, you don't know. That's okay.
No, I don't
Okay.
know how long, I don't know how long the awning company had been in there.
I think the permits show it going back to maybe the early 2000s or the 90s. I don't remember exactly.
Okay,
We don't
that's
have
fine.
a full understanding or record of. who's been in
That's
those.
fine. The question I was trying to get at is, had there been two uses in the past? And so I think I really agree with my colleague, Mr. Reddy, that I am not sure. And again, I'm not asking you to predict the future. I'm just not sure that I'm without predicting the future. I'm going to say I don't know if you would be able to get two separate tenants in there. And again, that's neither here nor there, but it's just the way I'm thinking about it.
I think Ms. Robinson.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Mr. Klatt?
I was going to say, even if let's say this went through, right, a new tenant came in that had a higher parking demand, that would come back in front of us anyways to scrutinize that or to request a variance for additional parking. So we would have some control over that regardless. If a new tenant came in,
Right.
that was a different use.
That was my point earlier. You know, at this time, we really don't want to combine it. We feel like that would be a hardship. But again, in a few years, if he ever vacates and moves out, then we'd have to come in front of you again for a new tenant, because any tenant is a change of use. So this issue may come up again, and we will do an easement. So the parking will always be the drive, and that's the only way it could ever be used is a drive aisle anyway. So the function, none of that's going to change. This is almost as you said, a technicality. It's going to be a paper effect just to please the zoning that was put on at some point in the recent past. But again, it's something that we really prefer not to do. Just do an easement.
Yeah, and that's what I see. I mean, it's operated like this forever, correct? I mean, you're cleaning this up, your new uses are coming in, whatever that may be, but you control both properties. If a future buyer comes in or you're going to sell, you have control over both, and that buyer's not going to do anything that's going to hurt them either.
That's right.
So
First
it
thing
can
you
be
look at is
combined
access.
later. There could be things added down the road. So that's where I see. These things could be done down the road too.
Yeah. And as a side note, we're going to really make this a beautiful property. We're going to paint. We're doing landscaping. It's going to really look nice.
Mr. Lineweber?
Every parcel that's ever come up that's been a problem where they've thrown a fence or rocks or barricades down the middle, probably, I'll say, it started out with the best of intentions. The issue here is that we would be establishing this this condition well beyond your ownership of the property into the next ownership. It stays with the parcel. So your tenants come and go, the business owner or the property owners come and go, but this variance remains. And I just foresee that at some point this is going to become, there's going to be two owners here that are at loggerheads for whatever reason. And our job is to look beyond the good intentions, I think, of you today, but look at the problems that this could be creating in the future. I think for me, it's a little unfortunate that you don't have this easement in hand or in place or, ready to go and say, here it is, where it can be evaluated by the legal experts. And is this sufficient? We're not seeing that. So again, to be able to approve something but say we want you to have, there's some condition that goes with it, is problematic. Like, even if that were the case, it's, the enforceability of that is a question. So that puts the burden on us, are we willing to establish this condition with theoretically two property owners at some point in the future?
Right. I understand what you're saying, but that's also, as he said, it's an unknown foreseen. But as Mr. Klatt said, that would harm my value if I were to try to sell one piece without having an easement in place. No one would buy it. The first thing you look at is what's the access. So it's almost an impossibility for that.
Yeah, I mean, we could have come with an easement drawn up or a lease agreement or some language in a lease memorandum or something. But from my early discussions with the planning department, that wasn't even something that anyone was even going to consider. It was combine it or that's it, that your only option is to combine. So we didn't proceed with that. We didn't go to the trouble of preparing one and bringing one to this meeting, because our hope was that we would come to an agreement that that was an acceptable solution, and then we would prepare one afterwards and submit it, record it before we apply for a building permit. So that's kind of just how we're ended up with that.
Mr. Murphy, I want to clarify two things because I think there's some confusion going on. First off, if they were to sell it in the future, even if we granted the variances, the next owner, if they changed use, would have to come before us, correct?
Potentially, if it was
different use, yeah.
Yeah, if it was a different use, parking requirements, whatever the zoning ordinance holds in the future for permitted and special land uses and approval process.
Okay. Second off, if we grant the variances, they don't need an easement, is that correct?
They're not required to have the easement, no.
Okay, so this whole discussion of easement is whether they had one before us or not is not relevant to the variances per se. It might help their case one way or another, but if they had an easement or didn't have an easement, the variance request would take care of everything.
Correct. You'd be acknowledging that that particular site plan as shown with the property boundary bisecting the central drive aisle. That would be
I just
approved in
wanted to
that
clarify that because it seems like there's confusion where people think they need the easement along with the variances versus not needing. Okay, thank you. Mr. Reddy.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up. So I'm still not 100% clear. So you said perhaps if the parcel was sold, they would have to come back before us, but there is a circumstance where it could be sold to a different business, so there would be two different businesses and they would not have to come before us?
Not sale of the property, use of the property.
Use, okay.
Use. So if another automotive, if it was instead of Al's Auto Repair, it was Al's on one side of one property and Bill's on the other, they're both auto uses, we wouldn't require any further review. If it changed to something more intense, like a carry-out restaurant or a sit-down restaurant, a party store, something that had a larger amount of required parking, then that, under the current ordinance requirements, that would trigger need for more additional parking, which they wouldn't be able to provide. They would be coming in front of you to seek a variance for additional variance for more parking space, to forgive more parking spaces.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Bastian.
So, if an easement were in place, would these variances be required?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because ordinance provisions apply to individual properties.
Okay.
And the individual properties are, the boundaries are not being proposed to be combined into one.
Okay. And then if an easement were in place, in the event that the property were sold in the future to different owners, that easement would run with the properties, wouldn't it?
It'd be a recorded easement, so any potential buyer would be able to see that in if they did their due diligence and checked recorded documents at the county.
Okay.
Is there any other?
Again, you're talking about your financial kind of hardships, and we're supposed to talk about kind of everything in the property in a lot of ways that Mr. Lineweber said, but a little bit off topic, still pretty important. Would you be assessed your property taxes different if it was one parcel versus two? Are you paying the same amount?
I feel like it would probably be the same amount. I guess I'm not sure how the city would view it. Again, I would probably argue it's worth less as one piece because now you're going to have two buildings on an odd piece. But I don't think they would assess it differently if it was one or two. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for the petitioner? I do have one for you. Seeing how it sounds, are you wanting to draft an easement and delay this and come back with an easement before us, or do you want us to go forward and have public comment and have a vote on this tonight? Because I'm just asking, just because I've heard of all the... I'm clear, but it seems like other people are a little...
Well, I'm happy to, I guess my question is, I'm happy to do an easement if we know that in a month it'll get passed if that's the only contingency.
We can't say one way or another whether that vote...
Because what we're trying to do is finalize our lease and get going with the build out, et cetera. So the timing is somewhat of an issue, but we want to do an easement. I mean, obviously, whatever it would take to appease you with the easement, we would do.
All right, so maybe, if, what, Mr. Wright?
Oh, Mr. Moore.
Yes, Mr. Moore?
I was just questioning why the easement would matter if the direction from the planning commission was either combine the properties or seek the variance. So I didn't understand why the
My
easement would
only
matter.
thing was that, because some of you have already stated of the easement being the concern, as I discussed already, the easement, as Mr. Murray proved, is not needed for the variances. So to those who are maybe thinking about not voting one way or another, or voting in a certain way if there's not an easement thing, that was my only reason why I was bringing it up.
But if they own both properties, they could tear up the easement the next day.
I agree. I understand. I was just throwing that out there.
I just didn't know what your line of thinking was. Thanks.
Nope. All right. Any other question for the petitioner? All right. Thank you. You can sit down. We'll open up a public hearing. Anyone to speak on this case, one way or against? Going once?
Am I able to say anything?
As a tenant.
As a tenant? Sure. Public comment.
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate you taking our time to hear about this. One thing that I do want to say, and I'm not sure if this changes the subject at all, but I know most of the time with auto repair, it's viewed as not a very pretty business. It's not very aesthetically pleasing to most cities, but my business is run a little different. I care very much about my overall looks. Currently have an operation in Farmington. We've done a lot to make the building look a lot better. The building sat empty for about 4 years. Auto repair shops are very few and far in between in regards to availability now. And this particular property, one of the reasons why it did stand out is because it does have the high roof lines, it has the garage door, it has the parking space availability that I would need in order to operate a proper business. The only way for this to really make sense for me is to be able to operate both properties. So there wouldn't ever be a situation in the future where I would look at this and say, I can only use one and not the other. The parking would not make sense for that to be able to make sense. So just wanted to make that comment in regards to this, and I appreciate your guys' time once again.
Okay, thank
you.
Anyone else here to speak on this comment, for public comment? Going once? Going twice? All right, public comment is closed. We'll bring it to this side of the board for discussion and or motions. Anyone? Mr. Reddy, you were first.
Oh, I'll move that we grant the variances as requested.
Okay. Mr. Clark, seconds. Go ahead, Mr. Reddy.
I think, there's a practical difficulty here. And they're unique lots with the access together and the buildings being where they are on the lots. And, the concern is that, so does this outweigh the concern of, selling one of the lots? But it would have to go to the same use, and then also that business with the same use would have to have a conflict. It seems pretty low compared to the clear difficulty in front of us. So that's why I was making the motion.
Mr. Clark.
No, great points. I mean, if I or someone were to purchase this, regardless of this variance, that drive is unusable. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, it's existed in this condition. It's operated fine for years. These things can be applied down the road in the future if you choose to sell it on the road. So, to me, it seems logical.
Mr. Wolf, and then Ms.
I'm going to vote against the motion. It seems like regardless of any easement or anything else that may or may not be granted, by this one owner, because this one owner controls both properties. If tomorrow I make the owner an offer he can't refuse, and I'm going to go put in my business there, I am well within my rights to come in and tear up the whole, parking agreement if there were to be one. So I think that the staff report and the planning commission made it pretty clear that there was only really one practical option, and so I think this is completely self-created, and with all due respect, I think that I'm going to be voting against this.
Okay, Ms. Robinson, I think I saw your hand next.
Yeah, I'm looking at this, I always forget to do this. Does it matter? Looking at this piece, the two pieces of property, as they stand alone, they really don't function. I don't know what you'd put in there other than, maybe a retail dress shop for bridal gowns or something, that you have one person come in at a time or something. So we have here the opportunity to have, and you can see in the past that it worked this way, one owner using both buildings, combining the two things. It works, and we have somebody here that wants to put that together. I think that if I go through A, B, C, D on my non-use variances, the chapter's restrictions on use, it prevents him from using it the way he wants to. It's like you have to have both pieces together. And you've got to put that driveway, it's unusable the way it is. You've got to be able to have that wider to get in. It would do substantial justice, of course. The plight of the landlord is due to the unique circumstances of the property, and the unique circumstances of the property is it is so small the way it is. Together it works. Individually, it's not working. That the alleged hardship has been created not by this person, but because that's the way the two pieces of property are. And obviously, they've been that way for a long time, and we can see that they worked that way for the previous owner. So for that reason, I will be in favor.
Okay. Mr. Chrisman, I saw your hand next, and then Mr. Moore. We'll go this way.
So I'm going to be voting in opposition. I feel pretty strongly that the clear solution here is a parcel combination. I feel that is far more appropriate than 3 variance requests. But I would specifically like to cite standard B. It says, basically what it's saying is that if there is a lesser variance that could be requested, we shouldn't grant the variance. And I can see a way to arrive at 0 variance requests. So just on that fact alone, I don't think it would be appropriate to approve this.
Mr. Moore?
Yes, I'm also opposed. I believe staff has made it pretty clear in the report that combining these properties is the way to go, and that they don't believe the petitioner has demonstrated practical difficulties, and I can't find practical difficulties in this situation either.
Mr. Lineweber?
Well said, and that's my comment. I think that there is a remedy here. That's the combination of the parcels, and therefore the variances are not necessary. So that would be the path to take. So I would not be in favor of the variances.
All right. Anyone else? I don't understand how we want to force a business owner to have to combine 2 parcels together to remedy this, when I understand staff says that's a solution, because, yeah, of course, that's a solution to not have it come before them. But as a business owner, I could understand them saying, hey, I don't want to handcuff myself. I have a tenant right now who can take up both these spots. Say he goes belly up in a year, but I am able to now get 2 separate tenants do 2 separate different uses. I don't want to handcuff this, or maybe I run into a money situation and I want to sell off one portion and keep the other portion that I know is successful. Why are we making him have to combine it when the site has been this way for over 60 years before the variances were put into effect for this? That is the hardship. He's on a site that's been this way for all this long, used the same way all this long, and yet we're disavowing those practical difficulties just because we're saying he should combine it just to make it easier on us. I disagree with that thought process. This is totally not his fault. It's been this way this long. It totally would do substantial justice both to himself and any neighboring. He didn't create this hardship. It's been this way. So I don't see how you're saying, no, this is his fault. No, it's not. He's had this problem. Yes, he could take it and combine it, take it off his wash, but then that would handcuff himself in another way. So I don't see where it says, hey, we have to combine it when it has to combine it. That's not the practical difficulty. So that's my stance and why I'm voting for this variance. Any other comments? All right, we'll move to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
5-4, the motion carries. Congratulations, best of luck to you.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. All right. We'll move on to other business.
Election of officers.
Election of officers. I believe that would be for chair. Is there any motions for chair?
I nominate you.
A second.
Okay. Any other nominations?
Nominate Mr. Wolf for vice chair.
Okay. Do
Yeah.
you accept? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and I accept too, yes. Any other nominations? Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of myself as chair and Mr. Wolf as vice chair signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Annual report, is there anything discussion on that?
The annual report is there for informational purposes. There's no action for the board to take, so you can move on to the next item whenever you're ready.
Okay. Before we get to public comment, I would like to ask Mr. Murphy notify especially the new members about the possible virtual training for, as well as any other member who wants to do it, virtual training for the zoning Board of Appeals that's going to be held next month.
Certainly. We can send out an email invitation if you are not already members. I believe that, is anyone not getting the correspondence from the Michigan Planning Association? Okay. Okay. So we can send that along, and anyone that wants to do the training that you're referring to or any others, certainly let us know. I know that Mr. Bastian has signed up for, did the training already occur? Was it valuable?
Excuse me. I believe it's the 11th or the 13th of March.
Okay.
That I've signed up.
So if anyone else is interested?
Is this the same training they typically do every year? Very similar
There are a
process?
variety of trainings, so we'll send you the email.
Okay.
With the link to all the options to choose from.
This one seems to be more the general one, and not the more specific one, but that's okay. It's always good to get a refresher.
Sure.
I've signed up for both of the evening.
And the city will pick up the cost on that.
Yep.
And we'll register, take care of all the business.
We'll move on to public comment. If there's anyone for public comment, you may come forward. Mr. Gomez?
I'll try not to take it time. Thank you, folks. George Gomez, 2018 Guthrie Avenue. I live just one street north of the Expressway Service Drive and east of Campbell Road, to kind of give you a flavor. And what I wanted to share with you real quick is a story. I've got a new neighbor, and somewhere over the summer she decided she didn't want to mow anymore between her garage and a common fence that we share, and my garage is on the other side of the common fence. Now, in her making the change there, she put the lava rocks and plastic and everything else, and she changed the elevation, as you can imagine. And what has happened now is that whenever it rains, it of course floods my side of the fence. And so, as a courtesy, I went ahead and just put in a French drain at a noticeable expense to manage that. She didn't do it to be harmful, she just did it because she didn't want to mow anymore. What brought it to my attention was in reading the one for Detroit Avenue, and I think we're kind of visual people, so I thought this was maybe perfect timing to bring this up to you. If you were to look at page 21, they show you as they built that long wall across, to extend it to the garage, that they didn't need a zoning exception, but they created this long wall that now ran across the neighboring yard. And I thought to myself, well, what if they were looking for a zoning exception, just moved it over a couple feet? And you approve these all the time or get these in front of you all the time. And what I loved about this sketch on 21 was it showed you how much they went out of their way to create their own French drain, so that they didn't in some way, with that big wall they created by extending the house, flood the neighboring yard. And I said, what better chance to talk to you a little bit about when you give up a foot or two on some of these homes that you've approved. It seems innocent at first, but if you don't look for somebody to say, well, okay, you want to build a longer wall, you want to push it closer to the fence, to the neighboring fence, are you looking for anything for how they're going to now manage the water problem they're going to create? And so that's why I wanted to bring it up tonight to you, to say, look, I don't know what you can do. Maybe it could be one of those contingencies that we can give you that foot or two gap and force it over further, but we'd like to see you come up with a plan, what's going to happen to the water. And when you think about some of these zoning rules, they're based on engineering. They're not just to be flagrantly, demanding. They're there to say, look, you've got to handle your water problems. You've got to handle the changes on your lot, not to affect your neighbors. And so I think it's been very generous in the past that you guys have given up the foot or two, but I've never seen anybody give you anything to say, what are we doing to our neighboring properties? So I just wanted to share that story with you. Some of us can afford to make the changes. Some of us shouldn't have been forced to do that. But if you would consider that in the future, as you give up that what seems innocent enough, I'd appreciate it if nobody else does. Thank you for your time tonight, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you. That's your point. Anyone else here for public comment? Going once, twice. All right, public comment is closed. Would one of our new members like to make the motion of adjournment?
I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion? No. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion carries. We're done.
That's what I get for being late now.
Yeah, Brandon Colo, he's the city commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's where he's.